These ice caps melting down with the transistor sound, and my Chevrolet Terraplane going round and round and round. Come a little cabaret, standing in a hurricane. Your brains are bored like a refugee from a house that's burning, and the heat waves calling your name. She's got an practice crown.
All right. Let me see here. Hey, what's up, Mark? I'm having some technical difficulties here, but we're just gonna let it ride, and I'm gonna figure it out as we go here. All right.
All right, sounds good.
I'm just trying to get you fully on the screen without having to see all my recording equipment going here, because I'm showing the Skype screen to everyone here as we go.
Nice.
Here we go. Almost there. Sorry for the inconvenience here. There we go. All right, Mark. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Glad to do it.
We've never met in person, so it's a privilege to get to speak with you. I guess I first became familiar with your work around 2007, 2008, which I think I was a little behind the curve. But I had started to see things here and there, and then you did the show in La Jolla at UCSD, which I'm a San Diego native. So
Right.
As soon as I saw that, I finally started putting all the pieces together and really became familiar with your work. I'm curious, was art a part of your life right from the get-go?
Well, pretty much. I mean, only in the way that, it was something that I was interested in doing as far as drawing. It's not like I came from a real artistic family, except for music, actually. A lot of musicians in the family. But I remember as a kid in second grade, sort of, drawing, copying things, and other kids sort of expressing an interest in that and saying, "Oh, wow, you're a good artist," and so it really, inspired me to keep going, getting that kind of positive reinforcement,
Yeah. Something that I really admire in your work, and I think that is something that I want to talk about right out the gate, is the quality of line in the stuff that you do. Mm-hmm. I know, and a lot of times, since I'm an artist, I'll sort of I'll put my sort of journey, I'll sort of place it on other people. And I myself, as a linesman, I guess, if that's a real word, it sounds like a football term, but
right.
I did the soul search for the perfect mixture, the perfect ink, paint that worked perfect, the perfect material and tool to create the line that I wanted to do. Did you have the same process?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because drawing was really the thing that I loved the most, so I mean, just doing ink on paper was sort of, that was where I started, and then trying to replicate that in more of a painting sort of materials, either on canvas or on the wall in an installation. So I had to search around and really try to experiment with different things until I finally found the materials that I really like to use for that stuff.
Did you find, was it like a holy grail scenario for you?
Kind of. I mean, it was, I still kind of fool around with different things. Lately I've been experimenting with different stuff on the wall just because I'm like, it's kind of a pain in the ass for me to get together all my little ingredients, especially when I'm doing something, in a different city or a different country. As far as like the paintings go on canvas, I pretty much I didn't have to search out the right painting, medium for the line work. I just had to find the right surface to work on. So I ended up using this flash acrylic, which is a vinyl. Comes from France, and it's super matte and flat, and it's kind of absorbent. So I just use straight up India ink, like super black India ink on that, and it works great. And then I spray varnish it and all that. But for the walls, yeah, I mean, it was more of like trial and error in that way. And I'm still recently, fine tuning that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And you mentioned doing wall paintings. You do, for people who don't know, you do huge installations where you basically take over a whole space and turn it into your own world. Mm-hmm. With doing that, do you have a good plan before you go into a big space like that? Like a map in your mind of what you want to do?
Well, no, actually, I almost always have a super detailed plan of what I'm going to do for that stuff because, the time is always so limited. Usually, I'll have like a week or 2 or 3. I mean, depending on how big the space is. But, the bigger, I always want to do like the most ambitious thing I can do. And I always make it, the most complicated thing I can think of. But I also sort of complicate that by planning it out, mapping it out down to the inch, basically. But to me, that frees me up to be more spontaneous once I get the ball rolling with the line work, So I'm not having to make corrections and adjustments and step back and look at it. Like, that's all planned out ahead of time, and then, it's all done when I get there at that part of it.
And time is really a necessity because for people who don't know, like the amount of time, like, I often say a small painting takes as long as a big painting, but to paint a whole entire room is tedious to say the least, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to plan it if you want to be able to complete it in that short period of time that you have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's sort of, I don't want to mess around with all that. Once I get there. When I get there, I just want to I need to bang it out, and I will, usually I'll bring assistants with me, different people that I've worked with in the past, and local people who's ever around, and interns or students or whatever. But I need to be able to get the bulk of that done as quickly as possible. So then, when I go back in to do the line work, like I said, that part, I can just I'll have time to do that. I'll have the time and the energy to do that part of it, which to me is the most satisfying part of the whole process anyway.
You had you mentioned that you like overwhelming the viewer sometimes, which mm-hmm. these really tedious wall murals have. There's an amazing amount of marks that go into a wall, which is something I always appreciate. Like, I don't even need to see an image for a full image, but just to acknowledge each singular marking that takes place, like mm-hmm. I find value in that. Mm-hmm. Do you ever find yourself overwhelmed by using that sort of idea of overwhelming the viewer? Do you get halfway through and be like, wow, I still have halfway to go with all this line work?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the thing. And I think I've gotten better at it over the years where I'm not pulling all-nighters on this stuff because I really... I've done that before, and I realized that, okay, this is not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because it's something I love and I enjoy, and so to make it so painful and in that way, it just takes. And then also, if you're rushing at the end, like I said, that's the most important part of it. So, and the black line work is always, comes at the end, and so I need to have some time. And actually, the work comes out completely different. If I'm really rushing it. I could still do it, but it's kind of nice to have a few minutes, to think about things and to consider things a little more. But yeah, totally. I've gotten into situations where I'm like, oh my God, I have that much to do and I have this amount of time. And, but I've really tried not to do that lately.
It's also becomes extremely physically taxing, right? Like, yeah. I feel like I'm in fairly good physical shape, and after a day of painting on a wall, you could feel those repetitive movements. And it's kind of like people who get tattooed know this, that like sometimes you get tattooed and it's not the pain of the tattoo that you feel the next day, but it's actually the pain of sitting in a weird position nonstop for hours on end.
Interesting.
You know? Do you find that really physical and mental draining in doing this?
It totally is. It's going up and down a ladder 1,000 times, and sometimes you have a lift, which is great. You can drive that around and go up and down. That helps a lot. But sometimes that doesn't really apply, and sometimes it's better to have a ladder. If you have to carry this ladder around, all these things that, I don't know, people might not think about, but these are all things that go into it. And so I try to make it, as efficient as possible. But these are big spaces, and I like doing those installations because it's really the only way to make work on that scale. Something really monumental, and it kind of has to be on the wall in that case. It's really no way to do that offsite and bring it in, and have the same feeling.
Just judging you by like book's cover, I guess, since we don't really know one another, I've always kind of looked at your work and I guess perceived you as a sort of like working class guy, and I think I get that kind of in the idea that you're willing to go paint these sort of highbrow exhibition spaces, so, like pushing the ladder around, getting the ladder bruises. Ladder bruises are the fucking worst. I hate them. Like the back of the calf ladder bruises. They're the worst. Right. But is there some truth to that? Is there any accurate perception to that? Like it feels like there's like a handmade. I think there's something with all artists being handmade. That there's a working class ethic to us. Is there something in your past or your early life that would make me think that?
I don't know. I don't think so. Wouldn't say that. I grew up, very like middle class. My father's an engineer, suburban Bay Area. I grew up in Livermore, California, and I don't know. I've never really had that outside of the art world, I've never had like a real like blue collar type of job. You know what I mean? Some of the stuff in the art world, but if it's in the art world, it's not really that that tough to begin with,
Right, of course.
I don't know if that answers your question or if that's what you were like driving at, but I don't know.
Well, it's totally like just judging a book by its cover because
that's fine. That's interesting.
I think there's something to the fact that the willingness to go paint these spaces that are just going to be painted over. So it's almost like you're giving something for free, and it's almost like there's something a little bit different than I would say. I think the normal art that would be shown in some of these venues that maybe for someone like me it may seem a little snootier or a little like high class. It almost feels like some of the artists who I'm seeing get into these museums and bigger spaces now have sort of snuck in the back door, but maybe that's just perception, right? Do you find any disconnect between like what museums are showing 10 years ago or maybe 20 years ago to now? Did any of that make sense? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so. There is definitely, especially lately, when I first started when I did my first large scale wall painting. I did one when I was in art school on the side of the Hollywood freeway, but that was sort of as I was studying with a drawing teacher who was a famous muralist, Kent Twitchell, who did a lot of stuff in LA. And so we just sort of did that under his sort of tutelage for that semester. And then I never did anything else like that for, like 13 years later or so, which was my first one at the Drawing Center in New York. And that was a show called Wall Drawings. And that was actually Barry McGee that was his first show in New York. And so it was me and him and another artist named Tanya Moreau from France. But that was that just sort of, back then, I think it was a little more unusual to give over these spaces to artists to do these large scale paintings or murals or installations, whatever you want to call it at that time. That was for the drawing center. That was like something they did every year, and it was a really kind of unique opportunity for artists to do something like that. And over the years, that has become more of a common kind of mode of operation. And of course, you see that a lot more now, especially with a lot of the street art stuff that's happening.
Which is really interesting, and it's funny. I think it's just being involved and watching it grow over the last 10, 15 years, and so on. It's been interesting, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing that pretty much exclusively for that 4-year period between '96 and 2000, and then I kind of got burnt out on just having everything I did destroyed and not having anything to show more than once, or to sell. And so my son was born at that time, so it was hard for me to travel and just do whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do it. So I made a sort of a point to do just 1 or 2 of the large scale installations per year, and then the rest of the time I could be in the studio making paintings. And it's kind of, I like that balance. I like to do both.
If we could talk about some of the imagery in your works, I think I made this analogy about some of the stuff that I've been doing lately, and I've been talking about our sensory perceptions a lot lately, and I was making these pieces where I was just making these black like silhouette figures with like almost like neurological electrical circuits like veining through, and the idea was like almost like removing the first layer of perception that we have. Mm-hmm. And I use the analogy of like the old health or biology encyclopedia that has the image of the person. You flip the right. transparency over, and it has the right. guts and the bones and the system. I sort of get that same analogy with your work. And it's funny because there's a lot of what looks to be guts or sort of like innards in the mm-hmm. in the actual drawings themselves, the images. But to me, as a viewer, like I almost look at it like, okay, here's these things that are really almost everyday objects with some of the things, and you're sort of peeling away this layer and showing another, like the innards of some of these things. And a lot of the images are often marketing tools for children. Is that, and yeah, not that that's all you do, but I think some of the recent work, it had Tony the Tiger and the Kool-Aid image. Is some of that what you're trying to get across?
You mean as far as like the peeling away of a layer and exposing? Well, I know what you're saying, and I can see that, and definitely there is sort of a visceral motif that runs through, as far as the imagery goes. And it's just, it's just kind of that just comes out of, sort of stream of consciousness kind of drawing and mark making, and sort of really not having a plan so much as what that's going to look like, but just improvising that as I go. And as far as the iconography of these sort of pop icons, starting with the show I did at Western Project last year, or 2 years ago, I guess. No, last year. I sort of was very conscious about the imagery that I was going to be sort of referencing. And it all had to do with the collapse of the economy and sort of the collapse of the American dream and all that kind of stuff. So that was where I got the Monopoly Man and Rich Uncle Scrooge and the presidential seal and the Warhol dollar sign. So it was all related to the government and the financial sector, and then with the other more recent work, the stuff that I have up in the Cola show right now in LA is the same idea, but using this imagery associated with corporate food. So it's sort of like an offshoot of that idea, and taking these images that are so squeaky clean and that everyone knows, and then corrupting them in a way, or just showing them as corrupted, but at the same time keeping that, that attractiveness with the candy color sort of backgrounds, and the keeping this sort of attraction and repulsion going on. That's another thing that I kind of cite in my work a lot, is this idea of two opposing elements. I like to put opposing elements together in as many ways as I can to sort of fight against each other in a way.
Yeah, like making gross things look whimsical.
Yeah, and vice versa. It's kind of, and I kind of try to do that on a lot. Yeah, like I said, on as many different levels as I can, whether it's the scale or particular references put together. Just a lot of different, many different ways as I can think of.
Well, it's interesting. I had mentioned that there's a lot of child iconography, which is sort of, it makes sense even with the banking stuff, like with the financial collapse. Mm-hmm. Like, we're all kind of, like, our government treats us like children, and we're supposed to look to them to be like our savior parents, and
mm-hmm.
and we're supposed to look to our banks to be these higher gods of some sort, and it seems like like marketing to children, like with the Kool-Aid Man, that cartoon has to be marketed directly towards kids to get their parents
right.
to go jump through the wall,
right.
And even like Charlie Tuna,
right.
That's to make kids want to eat that canned tuna, or
right.
And to sort of corrupt these images and make them look gross but still have that marketing sheen to them.
Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting sort of back and forth, yin and yang.
Oh, well, thanks.
With I think, and it's such a natural reaction for artists to try to pull from both ends of those spectrums. Do you ever find yourself as acting like devil's advocate sometimes? Do you ever find that in discussions or in your day-to-day life?
I'm not sure what you mean.
If I think to be able to do to have in your work that dichotomy of something gross and something not gross, or whatever the opposite is, you have to kind of examine both of those ideas, which I think gets you to look at everyday moments from different perspectives.
Right.
If you're willing to look at both ends of a spectrum like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because obviously this iconography, these images, these pop references, I mean, they're all things that I love as well. I mean, I don't eat Frosted Flakes anymore, but I did as a kid. It was one of my favorite cereals, and all those characters, they've become such a part of me and of most of us just through advertising, and they're sort of beloved characters in a way. I mean, and for me, that's sort of it's one of those dichotomies, one of those elements that you were talking about. So, to take something that is beloved and sort of fuck with it like that. I mean, it's been done, by many, many people, but it's different than taking something that is already, something disgusting and doing a drawing that's gross. I mean, or taking the same kind of image and painting it in a way that is really repulsive looking. So it's all kind of one note. It's a different approach, and that's one of the reasons I like to show it, to keep it sort of on the edge and have both of those elements.
You had mentioned stream of consciousness earlier, and I talk about it. It's been a little while since I talked about it on the podcast, so I'm willing to talk about it again, but I talk about it often. About that sort of meditative phase that artists are able to reach, or creative types, or even like sports, athletes that
Sure.
get into like a sort of focused state of mind. And you mentioned, like, when you do wall paintings, that it gets down to that line work, that's where the joy and the rewards come. Is there something in that? Do you find some comfort in that stream of consciousness moment that you reach then, that sort of clears then?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird thing, though. I mean, it's, I can go into the studio, and once I've got a painting kind of up and running, and then I can just come in and sit down and start working. Yeah, I can totally get lost in it, and time. It doesn't seem like time is passing, and you just. It's interesting. I mean, it's a different state, definitely, to be in mentally. I'm usually listening to the radio or podcast or something, and I'll work for a while. I take little breaks here and there, but I've noticed that if I work all day, and for me, like doing that line work is really, I can really only do that for about 6 hours a day, and then I lose it. And after I'm done, I kind of feel like I need a break in between that and going back into the world. Like I never seem to take that break, but I've noticed that when I go back out, and I'm not really ready mentally to interact with people so much.
That's interesting. You need what is that? What's that? What's the area called before you go to heaven?
I don't know, purgatory.
Purgatory. You need like an artist purgatory to relax in.
I think I need to meditate or something in between. I have to start figuring out how to do that. But meditation or I don't know. I need some kind of a palate cleanser there, because I love to be in the studio and working, but it is draining by the end of the day. It sort of does take a lot out of you in some ways.
Yeah, which is interesting to think about, if like how we become mentally drained. It's almost like, I talk about like that clear state of mind that we reach in some of that like stream of consciousness stuff. Once we like really get into the zone, is when our mind really starts to think more clearly. It lets go of all the other like day-to-day bullshit and lets you focus on like important things. But it's almost like an unconscious focus, because I'll have paintings that it's almost as if I don't remember doing them. Mm-hmm. Like looking at the marks is like, oh, I made that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it is sort of, for me, like a real extreme focus, and not that I'm not like, okay, focus. I get into that mental state, and it is extremely focused, and that's, of course, then you get interrupted, and it's you have to get back into it, and sometimes it takes time. But I remember, sort of on the opposite of what you just said, I remember like I'll look at a painting and I'll remember what I was listening to at that moment that I was doing that little area. Like I have all these memories associated with the different parts of the paintings.
That's interesting. Yeah, so it's like that hyper focus allows you to have like a sensitive memory as opposed to like me like letting go of whatever's happening and just not remembering. That's funny. You just got back from Buenos Aires, right? I think when we were talking about trying to get you on the show, you were just getting ready to head back or head out there, I think.
Yeah, I was there, I think, when I got that email from you. And so I had to wait a couple of days to figure out what my schedule was going to be when I got back. But yeah, I was there for this Puma event called Puma Urban Art. And they invited me and a couple of other artists, Frank Kozik, who is in San Francisco, and D-Face from London. They invited us out to participate in this show, and there were a lot of local artists there as well. And they brought in bands, one band from New York, and then other local bands. And it's just kind of a cool sort of local event where people would come out and just see the work and hang out. And I did a talk, and Frank did a talk, and just showed some images and talked about it. It was cool. It was a really great event. It was really a lot of fun. Buenos Aires was a really nice city.
Right. I met Frank Kozik a couple times here in San Diego at Comic-Con. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, no, I met him once before, very briefly. We were both in a show together a few years ago, but I just I was there by myself, and he was there with his wife, and they were just great. We just really hung out, spent like 5 days just checking out the city, and It was pretty cool. I like those guys a lot.
That's awesome. He and Ron English actually did a battle in my sketchbook.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they because I was going around getting people to do little doodles in the sketchbook while I was walking around, and Frank did one, and then Ron English did a mock one on the next page, like mocking him, and then Frank saw it and did another little drawing. So they had like a back and forth battle in the sketchbook.
That's
it's priceless.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Are those guys friends, or are they just fucking around? Or
I'm sure they're probably old friends. I'm sure.
Yeah,
it was all in
all in fun.
Yeah, in the best of jest.
Yeah, that's cool.
You're getting ready. I figured this was perfect timing. I guess we were doing some talking calisthenics here, some talking stretching. You're getting ready to go speak over at the LA Municipal Gallery. Get a little loose.
Yeah,
get the muscles worked up.
A funny day for talking about myself and my work. But yeah, tonight I'm going to the gallery, to LA Municipal Gallery, to talk about my work. It's kind of like the way they have it set up. It's like a little tour of the show with some of the artists. So I'll be, with a group of people in front of my work and just explaining it, talking about it, taking questions, and then we'll go on to the other artists who are Ken Gonzalez-Day and Heather Carson. We're all speaking tonight, and I guess there's probably 3 or 4 different events like that.
Are you pretty comfortable now with the public speaking and talking, having to talk about yourself, which is always so very strange, of course?
Yeah, it's never really pleasant. Like, I don't really like it so much. It's something I've gotten used to over the years, and I used to be deathly afraid of it, like most people are, I think. But once you get started, it's usually fine. And it's I like kind of like in Buenos Aires. Actually, they had they expected me to do this talk, and I was like, okay, fine, that's no problem. But I just assumed that they were going to be interviewing me on stage or something, and they didn't have any plans for any of that. So, and I didn't bring any images to show or anything. So I was like, oh, great. But I sort of just asked them. There was this one guy there who has a blog. I wish I could remember the name of it and plug it. He was there. And so I said, why don't you have him interview me on stage? Because it's always better to just, if you have a question to respond to, it's so much easier than just sort of getting up there and starting and, trying to make some sense,
That's I've been talking to some stand-up comics recently, and that's one of those things. It's like, how strange is it to have a conversation with a crowd of people and have seemingly none of them talk back to you? People get
right.
loose in the comedy rooms, but you're having a conversation by yourself to a room full of people. It's awkward.
Yeah, just to sort of monologue like that, it's tough. I mean, especially in that situation, if you're trying to make somebody laugh,
I think, and with that added pressure of having to be funny is even worse. But I think, I think it's good for artists. I've noticed just in doing this podcast, and talking with all these artists that being able to get the voice out there of a more complete story has been really beneficial, not only to me, talking and learning other people's stuff, but for listeners to really get a better sense of who people are. Because, usually artists get the 10 questions. It's usually they're pretty much the same, and you use some sort of similar answers or what have you. And you don't often get the amount of information to really get to know somebody,
Yeah, I think it's nice to get some, just some in-depth background. I mean, I love to listen to talk stuff. I do it all day long in the studio, and I love to sit down and listen to a conversation, but it's but if I hear half of a conversation, like if someone's on the phone, and I can only hear one side of the conversation, it just really drives me nuts.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I don't know, but yeah. It's good to there's not that many opportunities to hear other artists talk and just there's so much minutia and stuff that most people I think would be totally bored by, but I think most artists are interested in hearing and interested in just talking about. So it's a cool thing.
Yeah, I think I hope I hope that more artists take the opportunity to get out there and get their voice out there. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of other creative fields that are utilizing podcasting and it's funny. Like I was talking before about how graffiti writers were some of like the first artists to utilize the internet when the internet first started up. Like they had that sense of getting up or like getting your name out there, and they utilized the internet almost immediately whenever it became available. And as artists, we're all out there now with social media and the whole routine. So, it's good to connect with these people, I think, because and then even at shows, like you don't really have opportunity to really talk to somebody at exhibitions. It's such a tornado of emotions and everything else.
Right. And now, of course, I mean, the internet also, I think, is great for the fact that, you can be anywhere. And that was one of my, sort of things that I used to decide when I was moving back here from New York. It was kind of like, well, I don't really need to be in New York anymore as much. I mean, as I wanted to be there, in the early 90s, it was sort of it was a lot more difficult to interact with people all over the world, and now you can kind of be anywhere and still talk or show images or be in touch or socialize or whatever, network. So it's kind of it's changed a lot in that way.
It's the future.
That's right.
Well, I know we mentioned that you'll be at the La Jolla Municipal Gallery tonight. So for the people that watch the Ustream, maybe they'll be
LA Municipal Gallery.
What did I say?
La Jolla.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
To Los Angeles. Yeah. I'm thinking of La Jolla. It's so nice out today. I'm thinking I need to go get on the coastline. But do you have any other projects coming up in the distant future or near future besides this evening?
Yeah, I mean, aside from just like some stuff I've been working on lately, well, I do have this. There's this painting behind me here, this surfboard. There's a surf show coming up in Palos Verdes Art Center, opening in July. It's a group show. But other than that, my main focus for the rest of the summer is this. My first permanent public art installation, and that's commissioned by the city of New York, and I'll be in New York for like the first 3 weeks of August, installing that. And yeah, so that's kind of like my real focus for the rest of the summer. I have to spend the next 4 to 6 weeks getting ready, and then go there, do it, and when I get back, I don't have anything on the calendar. So that's kind of the weird, scary part of it. But I have plenty to do from between now and the end of August.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that commission.
Thanks. It's one of those things that I'd applied for a lot of things over the years. As far as a percent for art or one of those kinds of programs in New York, and I'd never gotten one, but they were cool enough to keep actually inviting me to apply and sort of compete for the job. And finally I got one, and it's really probably the best one I could have hoped for, considering the location. It's right lower Manhattan, right near City Hall. It's in a brand new Frank Gehry luxury tower that has a public school on the first 5 floors, and I'm doing a mural in the cafeteria of the school, and I get to paint it right on the wall, and it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Nice, and that goes right hand in hand with talking about the current food issues in America, huh?
Right.
Especially in for our children, like the junk that we're feeding our kids.
Yeah, it's true. But I'm not painting the same exact. For this, I'm doing something. It's kind of an unusual wall. It's 10 feet off the ground. It's 6 feet by 100 feet, and so it's a very long shape, and it runs along the ceiling. So it's kind of like a frieze, like architectural frieze in a way. And I'm doing more of a landscape idea, kind of an idea of what the surrounding landscape would have looked like, hundreds of years ago or more. So it's all just sort of a natural landscape, very lush, and but it's done in the style that I've become accustomed to.
Wow, well, that sounds really interesting. I look forward to seeing all that.
Cool. Yeah, it should be good. It should be fun.
All right, so let's plug your internet stuff. You got a website and the Twitters and the Facebooks and the whole thing. Where can people find you?
Yeah, Twitter is just at Mark Dean Veca, and markdeanveca.com. And what else? What else is there?
They can just Google you, right?
Yeah.
Find all that shit.
And yeah, so that's kind of what's how to reach me if you're interested.
Nice. All right. Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining me again. I appreciate your time.
Hey, it was my pleasure, and look forward to meeting you in person one of these days.
Yeah, we'll make the real life handshake happen. But for now, let's do internet dap.
All right.
Do that. Make that happen. Nice. All right. Thanks, brother. Have a good day. Okay.
Okay. You too.
All right. Later.
Ciao.